Good evening.
Good evening.
My name's Father Charlie Garza because since I've been on a retreat for 30 days, someone earlier today said, "Are you a priest here?" And I was like, okay, come on, I've been gone a month, okay? Really? Anyways. And I must say, Father John must have been saying something in his homilies lately because confessions are up 30% since from when I had to book it to get over here in time. And I was like, man, and the gospel's short today too. So I was like, I gotta get vested quick. So good job, Father John. So well done, well done. But in all seriousness, I do mean well done. I'm very appreciative for Father John and for the ways that all of our deacons, our staff, and so many have helped during this time. When someone asked me, "Father, how can you be gone for 30 days on a 30-day silent retreat?" I said, because I'm blessed with an excellent team that I know that can handle the parish while I'm taking that time. And so it was a great blessing. You'll get to hear more of that because I know you don't want to hear a homily that would cover a 30-day retreat, okay? And also, one of the side effects of a 30-day silent retreat is your voice is out of practice. So I had to take a throat lozenge earlier because I was like, dear goodness, how am I going to get through this weekend? I said, my voice isn't used to talking this much. I share all of that because it's good to be back. It's good to be with you all. But also, something that God spoke very much to my heart during this retreat is the difficulty that we have in hearing God's voice many times and distinguishing God's voice from all the other voices. After being 30 days in silence and coming back, you start to realize there are a whole heck of a lot of voices out there. And sometimes it's hard. It can start to get hard to distinguish God's voice from all of the other ones. And so know that something I'll be especially preaching on, not just in homilies, but also in podcast series in the future, is over something called St. Ignatius Loyola's Rules of Discernment, how we can distinguish God's voice. But in particular, there's two concepts that are very important. What's called spiritual desolation and spiritual consolation. So spiritual desolation, in short, is when someone feels disconnected from God. It's hard to pray. People don't want to come to church because you just feel distant from God. It's hard to do it. It's not something fun, and you just don't seem to have any energy. And it seems as if God is not present. Spiritual desolation stinks, by the way. It's not fun. And it's the number one cause of why people sometimes give up on God, give up on prayer, give up on church, etc. Because if we don't understand what's going on, it can be discouraging many times. God showed me a powerful image during my 30-day of how for the last year, most of the world has been in spiritual desolation. And it affects us a lot when we feel that disconnected many times from God. Now, spiritual consolation is what we like. Spiritual consolation is when it's easy to pray, when we feel God's joy, we feel God's peace, we want to be in God's presence because God seems so alive and we want to do nothing else but pray. And it's so easy many times to reject the other things that are going on. So it's important for us to always note right now, and I encourage, each day almost it's good to take a daily check-in. Today, am I in spiritual desolation or am I in spiritual consolation? And the reason why that's so important to note is because it affects the way we make decisions. I never understood, there's t-shirts that say, I heart, I love, Rule 5 of the Ignatian Rules of Discernment. I never understood it until this last retreat. What Rule 5 says, by the way, just to give you a snapshot, is in a time of spiritual desolation, never make a change. So AKA, whenever you feel disconnected from God, when you feel that God's not present, probably not the time to say, oh, I'm going to cut back on the amount of prayer that I'm offering right now. Or I'm going to change this particular practice. But guess what? We do it, right? I know I'm guilty of that one. When we feel disconnected from God, we change spiritual practices. Things that we would have done in a time of spiritual consolation when we felt close to God, in a time of spiritual desolation, we take the enemy's bait and we change something. The reason why in today's gospel our Lord says, remain in my love, is he's trying to strengthen us for those times in our lives when it's easy for us to experience desolation, when in our hearts we don't feel like God's love is present there, even though our minds tell us it intellectually. He says, remain in my love. And he also says, very interestingly, remember you're not slaves. A slave is someone that does not have a choice. One of God's greatest gifts is a gift of free will, even though sometimes when someone's free will doesn't agree with our free will, we might say, God, take away their free will, but keep mine, please. I get that. I've had that temptation myself sometimes. But we're not slaves. We're not slaves to sin. We're not slaves to those temptations that come. But the evil one sometimes wants to make us think that we are. When we remain in God's love, we remind ourselves, even in the present moments, how did it used to feel? St. Ignatius says, when you experience a spiritual desolation, it feels like God is not present. Try very hard to remember, what did it used to feel like? What did it feel like after that retreat where you felt so close to God? What did it feel like in that prayer experience when God was so present? What did it feel like when you used to love coming to church and experiencing God's love? What did it feel like back then? And as we start to remember those things, something changes within us. Some practice changes. And the desolation goes back into a time of consolation. But the problem is, the more we go away from God in a time of spiritual desolation, the worse it gets. The only way for desolation to change to consolation is by praying again. It's by talking to God again. And by realizing we can't make the desolation go away. That's the hardest thing about all this. You can pray 24 hours a day, and it's not like a magical formula of what it will take to get you to have spiritual consolation, because it's a gift from God. But God's promise is that if we keep doing what he asks us to do our part, he'll always be present with that consolation as his part as well. Now, recently, you might have heard that while I was gone, our bishop has made an announcement that on Pentecost Sunday, there's going to be some changes that are coming. He's discontinuing the temporary COVID protocols that have been in effect throughout our diocese. And also that he is stopping the dispensation that's been in place for those that there's been kind of a general dispensation that he gave during the pandemic for those that, for various reasons, he listed, certain reasons of why someone would be able to attend Mass via live stream versus Mass in person. And those things are on Pentecost Sunday going away. There's a lot of confusion about that, and my email box has been filled with certain questions that people have had from that. So one of the reasons why I'm here is to grant clarity for some of those things, because they always wait for the Bishop likes to do this when the pastor's on a 30-day retreat, of course, so there you go. Okay, but no. But what I want to encourage you is, what's important to remember is what I just said about remaining in God's love and hearing God's voice. Because that's the temptation we have. We stop saying, God, what are you inviting me to do right now, God? What are you inviting me to do, God? For those that have questions about whether it's time to come back or might have worries or fears, I hope you'll come back, because I'll let you know we've missed you. This is your home. And we want you to be with us again in person. But please, talk to God and say, God, what is it that you're inviting me to do right now? Because many don't realize that even without this dispensation that Bishop has, there's a general dispensation of the law of the church for illness. If someone has regular garden variety flu, it's not a sin for them not to come to Mass in person, because obviously we don't want them to pass regular flu. I know we've forgotten what regular flu is, okay? But once, again, that happens, it's not a sin to miss Mass for that reason. It's an act of charity not to do it. So obviously, if one would have COVID, it's an act of charity and not a sin not to attend Mass while one's doing it. Same thing, there's a dispensation for those that have serious illnesses. So there are some, again, outside of all the stuff we've been experiencing the last year with the pandemic, that they have certain types of illnesses, low autoimmune system, and even outside of the pandemic, they would be what is considered to be homebound category, and they would not be sinning by not coming to Mass in person, could watch Mass, again, pre-live streams that we have been doing on EWTN or some ways like that, participating in Mass in that way. So what Bishop's basically saying is we're going back to that. And for any that do have questions, I was only joking about the email box, by the way. I'm fine with someone emailing me, truly, I am, okay? I want people who have questions or have concerns, and I've received actually some very beautiful emails of people balancing concerns for their loved one who's ill, yet their own desire to receive our Lord as well, which warmed my heart actually to read. So just know you're not alone in any of those things. Please do seriously send me a message, and I'll be happy to talk and work through. But I don't want to talk about specific situations because that's not what I feel God's asking me to. But if there's anything that's unclear, let me know, and we'll talk about that. But again, my invitation is, God, what are you asking me to do? Are you asking me to come back to Mass in person? Are you asking me to do that particular spiritual practice or prayer that I let go during the last year? Are you inviting me to get the vaccine if I hadn't gotten the vaccine yet? There's so many different voices we can hear, but sometimes God's voice is the last one we ask. And that's my invitation. And that's going to be the thing that I'm going to be mentioning even more when people do ask me questions. First thing I'm going to say is, have you asked God about that? Because you see, I don't want someone to listen to Father Charlie, because I'm not God. And trust me, during my 30-day, God reminded me of that plenty, okay? Very fresh memory on my mind. My job is to help you to hear God's voice. My job is to help you, even in the times when you feel distant and disconnected from God, to know that God is still there and that you can go to God with whatever questions or struggles you have, and that God wants to give guidance in those particular moments. That's my job. And so please, pray. Ask God. Ask God from your heart. Express your concerns, your worries, your fears, your love, all of that to God. And then listen. God will answer. Not always in the way we expect, but God will answer. Now, due to, of course, our sanctuary still being out of commission, which that was one prayer that hasn't been answered yet. I was kind of hoping that Father John would have it all back to normal by the time I got, but that's not his fault. He did a good job. So, but just please know the status is, it literally took almost the entire time I've been gone just to get the fire sprinkler system back operational. Okay, that's been one of the problems. There's been problems getting parts. They had to rip off the stone in the Adoration Chapel because literally the entire way around the fire sprinkler system, it was literally like they'd repressurize it and we'd sprout another hole, okay, in the system is what basically has been happening for the last few months. So I know it's been frustrating. It's been frustrating for us, trust me. We're just now at the step where finally the fire sprinkler system in the church is operational, which means finally we can actually get back to putting back insulation, drywall, all that stuff, so that then we can go back into the church. But we're looking at, and unfortunately, a best case scenario, 6 to 8 weeks at least, okay? And if something else goes wrong in there, and I'm just like, Lord, please nothing wrong, okay? Then it's gonna be longer, okay? So just know that because of that, our parish is gonna be pretty much keeping things like normal right now. Other parishes are gonna be offering some relaxations and some of the protocols. We're in a different place because we're here in the PAC versus being in our sanctuary, okay? If we were in our sanctuary, there'll be some different things that would be going on. We'd have different options that we don't have. So just know that we are still going to ask people to wear masks inside, just like we've been doing. But we will also continue all of our live streams that we've been doing. We'll continue what we've been doing as far as having our parking lot option, and especially, please know, I'm hoping more and more people will will take use of that parking lot option. It's a very safe option, but it's also a way to stay connected with us. We'll have overflow in our parish hall. We've expanded it, and we'll continue to have our outside option. Very grateful to our tech team led by George Kaler and Andy Lynch, who've installed physical outside speakers now to make it easier to hear the Mass outside of this building. So I ask, please, even as other parishes might relax certain protocols more, just keep in mind, because of our church damage, we're in a little bit different situation than some of our other parishes are. Once we're back in the church, I'll be giving another update as far as that goes, and just ask that you continue to please keep patience. And I also just want to address any of those. I know I'm a mental health advocate. Some of you might not know that. And I just want to know one other thing that came very much up during my retreat is my heart for those who, I know that many times there can be questions about masks and all that. There are some who have legitimately experienced trauma. And I can only imagine the hell that it's been if some bad stuff happened by someone who is wearing a mask and you see everyone wearing a mask, I'd get triggered too. And so just know for any that have that particular place of pain or hurt in their past, my heart is especially with you. And just please know that you can always talk to me with those things. One thing that we are thinking about offering is, again, outside in our area, for especially people who are in those situations of having a spot outside the PAC where someone would not need to wear a mask, because again, I want to have that way of opening my heart to those individuals who have that legitimate pain, and just knowing that different people are in different places. This is a place where I want all to feel safe. I want all to feel welcome. And I just ask for your continued patience and love and support of us that you've shown in so many ways as we all continue to navigate this nightmare we've been in for the past year. But to know that as long as we keep praying, we keep trusting in God, we remain in God's love. There will be a time where God's spiritual consolation will come upon us. And even if we don't feel the love now, we will. We just have to keep striving for it.